Hi class, and welcome to this video on VCE Year 12 Economics, Unit 3 Outcome 1. And this video is really going to focus on the important economic concept of supply and the supply curve. Now these are in your Outcome 1, your 5th and 6th key knowledge points. And I hope by the end of this video that you understand the law of supply, you understand what a supply curve looks like, and then you can start to analyze and identify movements along and shifts of the supply curve. And you are able to identify factors that affect this supply curve. In particular, changes in the cost of production, technology changes, productivity growths, and what we call climatic conditions. This video is going to work really well after viewing the video on demand, because these two really cover the important aspects of supply and demand, which are integral to microeconomics. And you can see here, these are your 5th and 6th key knowledge points in Outcome 1 of Unit 3. So what is supply, and what do I mean by the law of supply? Supply is a representation of how much a producer, so someone that makes a good or service, is willing and able to supply at different prices. Producers are able and willing to supply products at different levels according to the price that they can sell them at. And the law of supply and the logic is that producers will always want to sell their goods and services at the highest price. Now, you might remember that is opposite to the law of demand, where consumers always want to buy goods or services at the lowest price. So we're going to have a bit of a conflict here, which we'll touch on in a different video. Now, technically, we call this law of supply a direct relationship between price and quantity supplied. I call it a direct relationship because this is the rule. As price increases, so as price goes up, the supply will also increase. So it's direct because as one goes up, the other one goes up. And as price decreases, supply will also decrease. And that's the key bit to remember. Price going up, the quantity that producers will supply will go up, because they are able to sell it at a higher price. And because they want to sell them at the highest price, they're prepared to supply more as price goes up. And the opposite is true if price decreases. Now, again, I'm not going to cover this in too much detail because we talked about in the video on demand. VCE Economics uses the assumption ceteris paribus. When we're thinking about supply and demand and price and supply, we're assuming all other variables are constant. So, what is the reason that underpins this law of supply, which is essentially as price goes up, supply will go up, and as price goes down, supply will go down. The major one is increased profit. Higher prices may act as a deterrent to consumers, but higher prices are going to be an incentive for suppliers, as it represents a chance for them to increase their revenue and also increase their profit. And for those that do accounting, because I also teach accounting, we really understand these concepts of revenue and profit. For those that don't, each unit sold represents an increase in revenue. And revenue is essentially the price that we sell things for times how much we sell it for. So if we're selling something at $10 and we sell 5 of them, we have $50 of revenue. The higher price is therefore likely to make a supply of a product more profitable, because profit is all your revenue minus your expenses. And to illustrate this, if the price of these goods that I was selling goes up to $15 and I still only sell 5 of them, I'm actually going to get $75 of revenue. Now, if my expenses are constant, let's say $20 each. I'm going to get $30 profit if I sell them for $10 and $55 of profit if I sell them for $15. So you can see there is a massive incentive for suppliers to supply more as the price goes up, because they will get more revenue, hopefully, per unit, and hopefully more profit. Now, in some cases, we need to understand a little bit more. Higher outputs might result in higher per unit costs as we're starting to stretch our capital resources. There might be bottlenecks and inefficiencies, so that actually might not be as much of an incentive to increase production as price rises. But remember that assumption, all things being, we're going to keep all the other variables constant, so we're going to essentially ignore this realistic outcome in this video today. So if we look at the same product that we were in the demand videos, green smoothies, you can start to see as the price goes up, so as price goes up as we go this way, the quantity supplied is also going to go up. So at $2, I am prepared to supply 60 smoothies as suppliers. But if the price increases to $6, I'm prepared to supply 100. Because you can see the relationship is as price goes up, supply will also go up. I'm prepared to supply more green smoothie as the price I can sell them goes up. And this creates what we call a supply curve. And you can see the supply curve is an incline. And this should say supply curve. It shows the relationship between the variable possible prices and the quantity producers are willing to produce. Now, if we look at our example, at $6, I'm prepared, so $6, I'm prepared to produce 100. So at $6, I'm prepared to produce 100. At $3, as a producer, we are prepared to produce 70. So at $3, 70. So you can see that there is an increase in supply as price goes up. Now we start to use some terminology. If price goes up, we are going to have an expansion of supply. The increase in supply occurs in response to higher prices. As we've gone from 3 to 6, we have an expansion of supply. If the price went down from 6 to 3, we will have a contraction of supply. So increase in price equals expansion, decrease in price equals contraction. So some terminology to use to ramp up your written responses. We also, similar to the demand curve, need to differentiate between movement along and shift of the supply curve. When discussing the supply, the changes in the amount of supply can either be a shift of the curve or a movement along. And it's the same concept as demand. In both cases, the supply for the good or service will change. So we're going to have a new amount supplied, but it's for different reasons. In movement along, the supply curve has the amount supply that has changed is a result of the price change. So the price change causes the quantity supplied to be different. So for example, when we went from $3 to $6, we had a change in the amount that was supplied. It went from 70 to 100. Shifts of the entire supply curve occurs when a factor of, and I apologize, there's a few little typos, factor of supply, cost of production, have changed, and therefore at any given price, there is an increase or decrease in quantity supplied. So same with demand. If we have a movement along, we will still have the same supply curve. We've just moved to a different point. A shift of will result in an entire new supply curve. So at any given price, there is an increase or decrease in quantity supplied. And here is a simple supply curve. And for a movement along, if I have a price decrease, so for example, I'm going from Q2 to Q1, the price has gone down. You can see it's gone from P2 to P1, and there is a contraction of supply as the amount supplied goes down. And I will say that the supply has moved left. There's a few little typos here, I apologize. If the price increases, the supply will move right and will go from Q2 to Q3. And we will say this is an expansion of supply because as price has increased, we have more supply. So a few little typos there, but that shows the supply curve moving along. And here is the example of that movement along in green smoothies. So if we have an expansion and go up the supply curve because price has gone up, we have a movement along due to an expansion of supply. If price goes down, we're going to have a contraction of supply as we move down the supply curve because price has gone down and we're willing to supply less. Perhaps more interesting is when we have a shift of the supply curve. So we have a whole new supply curve. So you can see the original supply curve was S1, and we can either move to the right, shift to the right from going S1 to S2, or we can go from S1 to S3 and have a shift to the left. So moving to the left or moving to the right. And there are different factors that will result in these shifts, but a decrease in cost, for example, will shift the curve to the right, and this increases the supply at all points as revenue and profitability will increase. So at all price points, a shift to the right will mean that I'm prepared to supply more. At every price, I'm prepared to buy a little bit more. A shift to the left might be maybe due to unfavorable climatic conditions, means that I am going to supply less at every supply point. So what are the different factors that can lead to shifts to the right or the left? And what could be the factors that could lead to a shift in supply? If we look at green smoothies, we can see that I have a shift to the right. I've gone from S1 to S2. At every price point, and we'll pick a couple, we'll pick $3 and $6 because we used them before. At these price points, I originally, at S1, was prepared to supply 70. I'm now prepared to supply 80 at $3. So it's gone up by 10. I'm prepared to supply more. At S1 and S2 at $6, I'm also prepared to supply $10 more, 10 more smoothies. So what could be a factor that could create this shift where at each price, I'm prepared to supply more? How am I going to get more profit out of each price? What could lead that? Have a think about that. The factors that we're going to talk about are these ones: changes in the cost of production, technology changes, productivity growth, and climatic conditions. All of these change the willingness and ability for suppliers to supply their goods for sale. Impact to the prices of cost of production is one of them. An increase in the cost of production, so how much it's going to cost you to actually produce the good, will shift the supply curve to the left. I am prepared to produce less at all prices, Why? Because my profit equals all my revenues minus my expenses. And if my costs of production go up, my expenses go up. So for each good, I'm going to make less profit. So I'm not willing to produce as much. This is, as we said, because increased costs will make it less profitable to supply the product in the market. The opposite of true, of course, is if costs of production decrease. Cost of production decreases, I will make more profit on each good, so I'm more prepared to produce more, supply more at each price. So an example of this is the cost of labour in Australia has increased substantially over decades. This made manufacturing of cars, for example, less profitable. This led to much lower levels of production or supply of these cars, and there's actually now no longer a car industry in Australia. Cost of production went up so much, these companies were not willing to supply these cars made in Australia. So what does this look like in a supply curve? Decreases in costs of production will result in a shift to the right and will increase supply at all price points. An increase in cost of production will result in a shift to the left and decrease the supply at all price points because we're going to make more profit if costs of production go down, less profit if costs of production goes up. Now, impact of technology and productivity growth are actually two factors, but you can combine them. You can, in reality, combine them. Productivity is the measure of the output per unit of input. How much are we producing with the resources we have? Now, why are these interlinked? Because one of the ways we increase our productivity, make more with what we've got, is with new technology. So new advances of technology actually increase the productivity of existing resources, and as such, a greater volumes of goods can be produced from the same quantity of land, capital, and labour. So assuming the costs of the resources stay the same, technology advancements can increase your productivity and actually lower the cost of production per unit, shifting the supply curve to the left, increasing your supply at all price points. It's the same logic because if we are lowering our cost of production, we are making more profit per unit, and it's because we've got technology to do the work for us. So for example, robot technology has reduced the costs associated with producing goods. For example, cars. And given there is less labour required to produce the same amount of goods, some of these supply will go up. So, new technology and increased productivity will result in an increase in supply at all price points or a shift to the right. If we have reduced productivity, which is, as you can see here, probably more so an unlikely scenario, but it could happen, there will be a shift to the left and a decrease in supply because we're actually having our costs go up. There's less incentive to produce goods at each price point. Now, the final factor is an important one and becoming more relevant due to global warming and climate change, the impact of climatic conditions. We need to recognise that most goods and services rely upon nature for some type of raw material. There is some input that is a raw material. Now, these materials are often heavily dependent on favourable climatic conditions to be produced. So if an unfavourable condition occurs in nature, this will reduce the availability of key resources. And if there's a less availability, the price of those resources will go up significantly. This will raise the cost of production and impact the amount that suppliers are willing to supply. So for example, climate change has resulted in significant changes in the planet's climate and excessive pollution. This has affected many producers' ability to consistently produce goods and services. For example, droughts in Australia have decreased the production of farmers as they have less water. That makes sense. And this would decrease the supply of goods that require water, like wheat. Now, if we think about what wheat is used in, it's used in many products like bread and cereal. So a decrease in supply of wheat could flow onto the supply of bread and cereal, shifting their supply curves to the left. The supply will go down because the costs of making bread have gone up. There is less incentive to make them as a product. Now, favourable climatic conditions can absolutely happen as well. This will reduce the cost of production and increase supply. So if we have favourable climatic conditions, there will likely be a decreased cost of production, a shift to the right, an increase in supply at all price points. Unfavourable climatic conditions will lead to an increased cost of production, shift to the left of the supply curve, and a decrease in supply at all price points. Now, other factors that may impact supply are things like relative profitability. If it becomes relatively more profitable to enter a different market and produce a different product, supply might decrease. Now, that's going to be dependent on how good the supplier is changing. But for example, if a business can make, for example, bread and also cereal, using that same example, and cereal becomes the more profitable one, supply of bread will go down and supply of cereal will go up. Because it is more profitable to make cereal and businesses want to make profit. Government restrictions, so the rules governments put in, changes to taxes, regulations, laws, subsidies, which are payments by the government to businesses, and other form will actually artificially increase or decrease the cost. And remember, businesses are trying to make profit. So if the government does something to increase the costs, supply will go down. Decrease costs, supply will go up. And there'll be a shift to the left or a shift to the right accordingly. Similarly, business confidence is important. If a business feels confident in the future economic prosperity, how well we're going to go in the future, they will likely increase their supply because they're confident that people will buy their goods and services. The opposite will occur if business confidence drops. These are ones to consider, but I highly recommend that you focus on these four. They're specifically talked about in the study design, and they all essentially come down to this, what I call the profit motive. Suppliers make products to maximize profit, and these factors are going to influence the cost of production in certain ways. And if cost of production goes up, there is less incentive to make that product because they will not make less product. If costs go down, they will be more incentivized to make that product because they make more profit. And it's about thinking about those sorts of things rather than memorizing this stuff that really helps you understand economics. So let's do a quick recap. I hope this video has explained and you understand the law of supply and how a supply curve works. You can analyze and identify movement along and shifts of the supply curve, and you understand factors that influence the profit motive of businesses and hence supply, in particular the cost of production, technology change, productivity change, and climatic conditions. I hope that you found this video helpful. I recommend watching other videos related to demand and the equilibrium price, what happens when supply and demand interact. And I hope that this has helped you build your understanding of VCE economics.